welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hi, welcome to Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. This is Jessica. I am your host, and I am here with the author of a really fun book, which is a romance. It is fake dating. I'm getting all of these tropes down because I've now read quite a few, and there's a few just core tropes that seem to be played with in the romance field. There's enemies to lovers, there's fake dating, and then there's a third one that's like one of the main ones, and now I am completely forgetting. Is it friends to lovers?
Yes, that's a popular one.
Got it. But that's not to say that those are all of them. However, I think there is sort of, like, I've noticed in the field, there's this need to just sort of draw certain things out. So this book is called Sunshine and Spice. It is a fake dating story which has some really just a cool cultural notes that I was not aware of. I am white, I am not Bengali, and it was interesting to kind of come into that world from the point of view of our female lead. It is also Sunshine and Spice. I want to go back. There's also like Sunshine and Grumpy is another term that people usually use for the pairings. Like, one of them is a little grouchy and the other one's a little bit more optimistic. And again, this is not to say that Sunshine and Spice is formulaic at all. It's just to kind of lay this out there for our romance readers to consume. And I am really excited to have you. Aurora, please tell us about Sunshine and Spice.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me today. It's wonderful to meet you, and hello, listeners. Sunshine and Spice is, a lot of the things you mentioned. There is that sunshine grump trope, as well as the fake dating trope. But the general premise of the book is we have Naomi, who is a brand consultant, and she gets the opportunity to rebrand a failing, or I would say even more neglected, South Asian business. As a result, she feels like she's in under her head because the owner of the business really wants to stay true to their South Asian / Bengali roots and history. And she comes from a family that she hasn't had a lot of her culture passed down to her. She's also a Bengali person, but doesn't feel like a Bengali person. So she realizes she needs help. And so in true romance fashion, she decides to strike up a deal with the business owner's son, Dev, to fake date. He's trying to avoid his mother's very stubborn matchmaking efforts. So she's going to pose as his fake girlfriend to help ward off potential brides in exchange for him teaching her about the culture, about pleasing his mother and meeting her expectations. And yeah, they set off on an adventure together to get the rebrand done and not get married.
So I have to kind of just back up a little and say, when I use the word trope, I don't use it negatively. I think that it's kind of taken on a different meaning than it used to. Usually when people would be like, oh, it's tropey, you expect blah blah blah, really, a lot of, I think, what some readers want when they're consuming their genre of choice is they kind of want to know a little bit as to what their comfort food is inside the sandwich, inside the between the pages. And to say that you don't expect or you don't want to see certain tropes is unfair to readers, because especially with like romance or horror, which are another genre that I like, you're seeking it out because you want a certain emotion. And I think that you want to know what the tropes are, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to fall 100% into the same way that every other book did. So I guess my question for you with that is, when you set out to write this book, the character of Naomi and the character of Dave they're very different, but they have a lot of chemistry. When you yourself are reading like a fake dating romance, and like a sunshining grumpy romance, like, to you, what makes those characters just crackle for you, and how did you know that Naomi and Dave were going to have that spark?
Um, well, I've gotten some really great advice from another author. She was one of my mentors when I was in a mentorship program. Her name is Regina Black. She said, really think about two people when you're writing your main character and your love interest that under normal circumstances would not expect to find each other and would be the last two people you think might end up together. And that just lends itself to great chemistry, great banter, complex conversations that tend to bring people very close together without them realizing it sometimes. So for me, that was kind of the basis behind Naomi and Dev, and they had a lot to learn from each other, which I think also added to that crackling chemistry, as you said. And the fact is, like, we have this grumpy guy and this woman who loves to tease him, and that also lent to some really fun exchanges and like moments that became romantic that maybe didn't start quite as romantic as intended.
So when it comes to putting together just their backgrounds, first of all, I have to say I did love Naomi's relationship with her stepdad. I thought that they had this just really sweet, sweet chemistry of, a father and a daughter. But you also had Naomi's own clash with her mother. Now, her mother got pregnant with Naomi and just fled her family. And with that, seemingly fled all of tradition, which is why Naomi does not have, really the cultural background, which she really needs, by the way, for Gia's Bazaar, because she's supposed to be rebranding or refreshing this bazaar, but she's not familiar with the food. She's not familiar with certain terminology, and you get the sense that it was just kind of a sore topic with her mother. Whereas with Dave, he was born just really swimming in this culture. His family owns this bazaar, but he also, in a way, is rejecting things that he doesn't, see fit with it. So the balance between the two of them, when did you really like, was it hard to kind of see where the pendulum was swinging back and forth, like to hit that perfect note as to where they were going to come together in the middle?
I think when I wrote this novel, I just had this real desire to write a novel that people would read and feel a sense of hope. I think, like, I did write this novel for anyone and everyone to enjoy, but it obviously has this perspective from people living in the diaspora, immigrants, children of immigrants. And I think a lot of that lifestyle is figuring out what works for you as a person versus maybe what works for your family, what works for your cultural demands. So for me, I really wanted to be this underlying thread of, you find your own way, you find what works for you, and there's no right or wrong way to live and find love and be in love. So I think that was kind of the guiding light as I, helped Naomi and Dev fumble along and figure out how to make it work with each other, obviously coming from very different backgrounds.
Yeah, and again, it's like they came from different backgrounds, but also the same background. And
Mhm.
that was, I think, a really important note in it. And also just as they were kind of falling for each other slowly, you could see those threads kind of come together. But, of course, there was also just the concern that it was, there wasn't like, for instance, like with Naomi's background, she wasn't going to be accepted by his family because, as we find out, his family's trying to set him up with a matchmaker, and all of these women are throwing themselves at him, which is very funny, by the way. I have to say, like, I really enjoyed just kind of watching all of these different women. And that was kind of, again, like that was like a whole other thing. It was, like they all had their own spice as well. They came into it like, okay, here's somebody who's looking for someone, and Naomi's like, nope, he's not looking for someone because he's got me, and he's like, I'm not looking for someone because I've got you, which is the fun of fake dating in general. With each pass, it seemed like you were having a lot of fun with it. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
I love comedy and humor, and I just wanted to see it reflected back in what I wrote. And I did really love writing those scenes. As you say, all these women are throwing themselves at him, and yes, to an extent, and he's so resistant. So, and it's not even like I wanted to write women who, are desperate for love. It's just more of a feeling of like, they're trying to find, a spouse and, dating, widening their dating pool through a matchmaker. And then you have this guy who's not only resistant, but like awkward and not always socially aware or competent. And it was just really fun. I wanted to have humor there. I think there's a lot of humor that goes hand in hand with love and dating, and it's kind of fun to explore that side of it, next to really intense, complicated emotions.
But I have to commend the fact that, like, it didn't feel like any of these women were desperate at all, and that was really, really appreciated. Like, it wasn't like because it was like watching, I don't want to say watching a train wreck in slow motion, but it kind of was, because like you knew when one of these women was going to enter the scene. As soon as they showed up, you're just like, up, here it comes. But they were awesome in their own way. Every single one of them were just fun, and you're just like, I was rooting for them, like, not with Dave, but like, there'll be somebody out there who will appreciate how direct you are, or how much fun you are, or just, the fact that you really are just very self-possessed, and you know what you're looking for. And even though on paper he seems to be what you're looking for, it's not gonna work, especially because we know this, he's I mean, is it a spoiler to say who he ends up with?
I mean, it's romance. Real romance readers will know things
Yeah.
are going to work
Yeah.
out between Naomi and Dave.
But really, it was fun. I liked them. And that was a real testament to your writing, to have somebody who was on the page for just such a short amount of time. And you were just like, well, I know he's not going to end up with her, but I hope it works out for her somewhere.
Yeah, I think I really appreciate you saying that, because I did want to write characters that people root for, even if they maybe had a minor part. And it's challenging, but it's just, thank you for saying that, because it feels good to know, these women were not just, there for a moment. They made an impression, and I appreciate that.
So were there any other characters, like side characters, that you just really, really enjoyed writing?
I actually, there's a few. Every character starts to mean something to you no matter how much time you spend with them. With Gia, that's Dave's mother, she's a bit dramatic and she's a little bit of a foil for both of them, but I learned to love her and respect her, and writing that drama and flair for, being over dramatic was actually really fun for me. I really liked writing her sister, Ashi, who's a little bit more of a balanced maternal figure for Dave as well. She was just really lovely, and I think kind of the voice of reason sometimes in this chaotic romp with all these different characters. And I also really learned to appreciate Cynthia, who is Naomi's foil and another brand consultant who is a little bit of a competition for Naomi. Yeah, I really enjoyed writing Cynthia, and just this unlikable character who is direct, successful, and a little bit, mean sometimes. And I enjoyed her too.
So, in the realm of these characters and these stories, would you ever go back and return to one of them and maybe tell their story?
Well, I can't give a ton away. However, I am currently editing book 2, which should come out in 2025. It is, I mean, for anyone who reads the book, I'll just spoil it. It's about Cynthia. She was just a natural spin-off. It's still a standalone, so you don't need to read Sunshine and Spice first or anything. Although I think if you do, it'll really make you appreciate where Cynthia's coming from in book 2. But yeah, she's my next leading lady, and I'm really enjoying writing her.
I'm excited. That's actually really cool. Thank you. Thank you for spoiling that just slightly. I hope I didn't get you into too much trouble.
No, I'm sure I'll be fine.
So I wanted to just talk a little bit about the food that you talk about in your book. I am a big foodie myself. Is there anything like specifically that you would recommend folks explore who are not as familiar with the cuisine?
Yeah, there's that one scene where Naomi and Dev go to a cooking class and they make gulab jamun, which is not a Bengali dessert, but it's a very popular dessert in South Asian culture. You can often find it in Indian restaurants. I think it's people who do not grow up eating that, or that flavor, that rose water flavor, and it's very sweet. You either love it or you hate it. I recommend it with vanilla ice cream and heat it up a little bit. I think it's delicious, but definitely something to try. And of course, I think nothing beats a warm cup of chai, and that's mentioned a few times in the book. I think it's just comforting and wonderful, especially for, cold fall days. So those might be my two, my two recommendations. But South Asian cuisine is just, there's so much to try and so many variants of like the same dish, depending on which region it comes from. I'm a big fan of Bengali cooking, obviously. My mom's cooking is just my favorite, and I feel that really weaved its way into the story. But you got to try it. There's just so many things to love about it, and vegetarian options. There's just lots. So I really maybe can't pick one. I'm just kind of getting hungry thinking about it, to be honest.
We happen to live in an area where there's a pretty big South Asian community. So I might be, stopping by, a restaurant and giving some of these things a shot.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. Check out Sunshine and Spice. I know that it is already out in the world. It is just a really fun, sweet, and a bit spicy fake dating romance novel that I think a lot of people are just really going to enjoy. And it might make you a little hungry, like it made me just a little hungry. Once again, this was Jessica with Syosset Library Turn the Page podcast. My guest was
Aurora Palit.
And we are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.